There really is no point trying to predict the 2022 NASCAR season. Things are changing constantly. Let me put this in perspective for you. Less than 2 weeks ago, Kevin Harvick had led a total of 13 laps this season. Now, he's one of only a handful of drivers with multiple wins, and many are taking him seriously as a Championship 4 favorite. It took less than 2 weeks for the narrative to completely change. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove Richmond Race Recap Edition. There's a lot to say about this one. We'll look at the top finishers in a moment. We'll also look at the playoff grid, what has and hasn't changed. We'll talk about the actual racing towards the end. Many on social media calling for Richmond Raceway to lose one of their 2 dates. I'll address that towards the end. I want to begin with Kevin, the closer, Harvick. I've never really liked that nickname. Sure, there are plenty of times, especially early and middle of his career back when he was with RCR, where he did feel like the closer. Where did he come from? But later in his career, especially once he got to SHR, I felt like there were way more examples of him losing a race late, him or his team blowing a chance in the final stretch. I felt maybe we'd finally moved past that nickname. I always thought Happy Harvick, the sort of ironic, sarcastic nickname, fit him better, but I was wrong. He hasn't had a race this year yet where he, just showed up last second to win, but if we look at the entire regular season as if it was one long race, then oh boy, he has. The first 22 races of this season, I cannot stress this enough, Kevin Harvick had led only 13 laps total, and 11 of those came at Atlanta, a super speedway. Harvick was winless for 22 races. He was on pace to have the fewest top 5s and top 10s in a season since, 2012 or 2009. He wasn't even in the playoffs. He was outside of the 16 driver playoff grid. But that was then. That was those first 22 races. These last 2 weeks, really it's only been, 7 days now, last Sunday to this Sunday, the narrative's completely switched. Harvick has now won 2 races in a row. That's right, he had a 65 race winless streak that had spanned almost 2 full years. He's now won 2 weeks in a row, led a bunch of laps, 2 very different tracks I might add, very fast, 2-mile oval. Michigan, this was a short track at Richmond. Not much tire fall off last week, a ton of tire fall off this week. Kevin Harvick has suddenly emerged as a legit championship contender. He has reclaimed the nickname, the closer. Because boy, he is closing out this regular season better than anyone. Going into this race at Richmond, all eyes were on Martin Truex Jr. and Ryan Blaney. 2 drivers battling presumably for that final spot on points. Truex has a strong history at Richmond. Both drivers, Blaney included, ran really well here in the spring, but today they never commanded much screen time. The focus, especially in the second half, was on Kevin Harvick, Joey Logano, Chris Buescher, a whole lot of Fords. Plus the Toyota of Christopher Bell at the very end on a slightly different pit strategy almost made it work. Man, one more lap, maybe even just one more set of corners, Christopher Bell wins this race and we'd be kind of singing a slightly different tune. Point is, Kevin Harvick and crew chief Rodney Childers are championship contenders once again. I still can't wrap my head around it. It just doesn't quite compute. Where did this sudden speed come from? And I want to broaden this point to Ford in general. All year long, the focus has been on Chevy for sure, between Hendrick and Trackhouse and Tyler Reddick, but also Toyota. Both Busch Bros have won, Hamlin's got a couple wins, Bell, Bubba Wallace right now on the hottest streak of his career. We haven't talked much about Ford. And Ford's won races. Logano's got a couple of wins out of Penske. Austin Cindric won the Daytona 500. Blaney hasn't won a regular season race, but he did win the All-Star race. Chase Briscoe got his first career win earlier this year, so Ford has been in contention. They've just felt like the third wheel, if you will, compared to Chevy and Toyota. But today, at a track that's typically been Toyota's playground, Ford was very much in contention between Harvick running top 5 all day, Joey Logano top 5 all day. Eric Almirola started last practically, drove up into the top 5, was a contender. Chris Buescher out of RFK, and actually his teammate Brad Keselowski even had top 5, top 10 speed in the first half. Chris Buescher was a threat to win late. What's going on? Ford was extremely impressive today at a track that I don't typically expect to see Ford do well. Like, they always have their good drivers. Penske's always fast here for sure. But Richmond is Toyota's track. Toyota is usually the manufacturer to beat. And Hamlin was in contention. Kyle Busch came back from a spin to get a top 10. Christopher Bell needed one more lap. Toyota was there. But it was Ford, in my opinion, that really stole the show for the most part today. So all of Ford has something to be proud of, something to build off of going into the playoffs in a couple of weeks. This championship, the championship 4, is wide open. We've talked about parity this year. It cannot be stressed enough. This is the most unpredictable NASCAR Cup Series season I have watched ever. And I know I've only been watching NASCAR closely since like 2004, 2005, but there have been some wacky years in there. None of them hold a candle to this one. I'm scared to make predictions week to week. Things change that quickly. It's crazy, but it gives fans a reason to tune in every week. You never know quite what to expect. Let's look at some of the top finishers. I know I just name dropped a bunch of drivers, but obviously Kevin Harvick gets the win. Christopher Bell finishes second. Chris Buescher, really impressive at the end, said he just burned up the rear tires a little bit, trying to run that high side to chase down Kevin Harvick in lap traffic, but still a really impressive performance out of Buescher. He'll be a threat at Watkins Glen next week. We've seen him have speed at road courses this year, and obviously Daytona. He won a dual race back in February. Don't count the 17 crew out just yet. Nobody expected them to be a contender at Richmond today. That's hopefully good momentum going into these next couple weeks. Fourth there, Denny Hamlin. All the Gibbs cars, all 4 of them finished in the top 10. Even Truex, 7th. Kyle Busch, 9th. A solid day for Toyota, just not quite as dominant as we're used to seeing at this track. Chase Elliott gets a good top 5. After that streak of like first, second, whatever it was, he's had a couple iffy weeks, like Indianapolis, crazy things happened over at the road course. But then last week, he really wasn't that good, was not competitive at Michigan. Bounced back in a decent, kind of low-key way here today. Good top 5. Joey Logano, Eric Almirola, I mentioned they were both very competitive. I thought Logano had a great chance to win this race, but just faded throughout stage 3. Sort of surprising. And Ryan Blaney rounds out the top 10. Let's talk about Truex and Ryan Blaney for a moment. I did a whole video studying these two just a couple of days ago. They drew most of my focus today, especially early on in this race. From my perspective, Martin Truex Jr. just squandered one of his best opportunities, not just to win a race. Truex had 7 straight top 5 finishes at Richmond coming into today, including 3 wins. He also squandered his best opportunity to make up points on Ryan Blaney. He came into today 19 points behind Blaney for that last spot. If you don't win this race, at least eat into that gap a little. He didn't do that. Ryan Blaney collected 11 points through the first 2 stages. Meanwhile, Martin Truex Jr. could only scrounge up 1. Truex did ultimately finish a few positions better than Ryan Blaney, but he now exits Richmond minus 26. He lost points to Ryan Blaney at one of his best tracks. You can go and look at the playoff grid right here so you can actually see it there for yourself. That's disappointing no matter how you slice it. Subplot, but Kevin Harvick moves himself up a little ways with a second win, 5 more playoff points. Truex does have a good track coming up for him, Watkins Glen, but this has been a weird year for Truex. As I've said before, tracks that he's historically been great at, he's struggled at. Between Sonoma, Martinsville, just road courses in general this year, it hasn't been your typical Truex season. Like, Truex only has 1 top 10 on a road course this year. It was a 7th at Coda. So I'd watch for him to be good at Watkins Glen this week, but I wouldn't count on it. So 26 points, that's a serious deficit to try and make up over the next 2 weeks. He's gonna need Blaney to run into trouble. Going back to the top finishers, I wanna talk about Kyle Busch for a moment. He finally got a top 10. I don't wanna gloss over that. 8 weeks in a row without a top 10 finish. As Busch noted in the media center this week, he's had speed. Like one of those races, he finished second at Pocono but got disqualified, so technically that doesn't count as a top 10. One of the highlights early in this race was a battle between Kyle Busch and Ty Gibbs, making just his 4th career Cup Series start behind the wheel of the 45, with Michael Jordan, side note, in attendance looking on. At one point, it looked to me at least, as though Kyle Busch was looking to the inside of Ty Gibbs. Gibbs didn't realize he was there or wasn't going to give him that room, wasn't going to give him that position, came down, and they made contact, and Gibbs kind of washed up. In the very next turn, Ty Gibbs decided to pay Kyle Busch back, and he knocked Kyle Busch up out of the way, got back by him. The two raced side by side for, I don't know, a couple dozen laps, it felt like. Frustration definitely setting in for Kyle Busch as he was the better car, having to use up a lot of his tires to try and race Gibbs. Eventually, Kyle Busch got by him, and Ty Gibbs had an engine failure, a mechanical failure that relegated him to like a last place finish. But to me, it stood out as like kind of like a metaphor for the contract situation Kyle Busch finds himself in. Like, Kyle Busch and a Gibbs going back and forth, getting more and more frustrated, but all this time they're in 16th place. Both sides are losing no matter what. To me, that is kind of a metaphor for the current contract situation Kyle Busch and Joe Gibbs Racing find themselves in. I don't know. I just wanted to point that out. Still, great top 10 result for Kyle Busch. He needed it, considering he then came back from a spin in stage 3. Good recovery. And now, I do want to talk about that spin real quick. Not a lot of incidents out at Richmond Raceway today, just like in the spring, a lot of long green flag runs, but one notable incident came just after a restart. Ross Chastain in the 1, Kyle Busch in the 18 made contact. Busch went around, collected Eric Jones. A few other drivers got a little bit of damage in this. Once again, another incident involving a Joe Gibbs Racing driver and Ross Chastain. We know the history those two sides have had this year, and in my opinion, Joe Gibbs Racing has every right to be frustrated with how Chastain has raced them at many points this year. But this incident here today, I put very little blame on Ross Chastain. The turn before, Chastain was middle 3 wide, Ty Dillon was squared up next to him, Kyle Busch was on his outside, Chastain held his line, 3 wide middle. Going into the next turn, Ty Dillon was still close to having a nose. He was maybe slightly inside of Ross Chastain, so Chastain entered in the second groove, was going to give Ty Dillon that room. They're still 3 wide, just like the previous corner. Kyle Busch is the one who seemed to believe, based on maybe information he got from his spotter, that they were no longer 3 wide. He was 2 wide, so he came down. Kyle Busch spun himself off of Ross Chastain's right front, in my opinion. You can say, hey, Chastain should have gone all the way to the bottom because, he was barely clear of Ty Dillon, but considering they were 3 wide the previous corner, I'm surprised Kyle Busch was so quick to, come down and assume they were 2 wide.
I don't think that Kyle Busch considered they were 3 wide.
I don't know. In my opinion, that was mostly on Kyle Busch and his spotter. That was a miscommunication. But Denny Hamlin's crew immediately radioed, Chastain got him another one. Truex radioed his team. I knew Chastain was going to pull some BS like that. And I look at the replay time and time again. Chastain held his line. He was middle 3 wide. I understand Joe Gibbs Racing, again, being frustrated with Chastain for things he's done in the past, but now they're just looking for reasons to be mad at him. Chastain even said over the radio, hey, I was trying to leave a lane for Ty Dillon and Busch just came down. Like, sorry for what happened to him, but that's what happened. I've defended Chastain at times this year. I've also come down hard on Chastain a few times this year, but I refuse to join the angry mob of Joe Gibbs Racing fans in this instance. That was not Ross Chastain's fault. Just gonna throw that out there. You guys feel free to disagree with me. I think I spelled out my case pretty clearly. I think the video, in my opinion, backs it up. All right, I'll move on. I've been sick the last few days and I can feel my voice is starting to die on me. I want to talk about the racing for a moment. Richmond Raceway is not my favorite short track. I'll just throw that out there first and foremost. I think Bristol is the best short track in NASCAR. I think it's the best track, period, end of story, in all of NASCAR. Concrete Bristol, I should specify. Dirt Bristol's fun, it's different. Concrete Bristol, best short track. Martinsville typically is second best. This spring race was a disappointment for sure, but let's assume that was an outlier. Martinsville's still second place. Richmond's always been third. I love that often you see multi-groove racing, tire wear, strategy, but it never consistently delivers on the close quarters, beaten and banging action fans expect from short track racing. As many have noted over the years, and I noticed Jeff Gluck noted this today on Twitter, Richmond often races like an intermediate track. Some intermediate tracks are great, but they certainly put on a different show than what we expect from short tracks. And with only 5 true short tracks on the schedule, I think fans are hoping for something different than intermediates. There are a ton of intermediates on the schedule. When we go to one of these few select short track races, we want to see the tempers. We want to see the fenders folding in on themselves. We didn't get much of that today. We never get much of that at Richmond, but I still thought today was a good race. Like, we got a few spins, especially in the second half of this race. There was a lot of passing throughout the field because tire wear was huge. I love that you could basically use the outside lane as a push to pass for a temporary amount of time until your tires burned up. I thought today was a really, really good race, but between yesterday's not so great truck race and, previous Richmond races, I've seen many on social media pushing for Richmond to lose one of their dates. And I'm gonna push back against that hard. For the last few years, I've seen nothing but support amongst fans on social media for more short tracks. Bring Nashville Fairgrounds back, bring North Wilkesboro Speedway back. They put the Clash inside of a stadium, made it the shortest of short tracks, and fans seem to love that. Again, we only have 5 short tracks on the schedule. I'm not counting Bristol Dirt. I do not want to see Richmond Raceway lose a date unless maybe Nashville Fairgrounds comes back. Maybe somehow, some way the Cup cars go to North Wilkesboro one day. Like, unless we start to add a couple other short tracks that are better than Richmond, I don't want to see any of this talk about Richmond losing a date. NASCAR was born from short track racing. I think short track racing can and should continue to be a part of its future. I don't want to see us bail on Richmond too hastily. Like, what are you gonna replace it with? Another road course? A street course? I mean, if we want to put it in a stadium somewhere, sure, but NASCAR is not showing any indication that's gonna happen. I don't want to drop Richmond for Kentucky. I'm sorry, Kentucky fans. It's a shame that that track's not on the schedule anymore, but I'm not ready to make that swap just yet. Anyway, share your thoughts down in the comment section below. Just wanted to rant about that for a moment. Let's put this race on the groovy gauge. Great race. Stage 2 was dry, but stage 1 was pretty action-packed, even though I think Chastain led every lap. But stage 3 was fantastic. Drama between Chastain and Kyle Busch. Christopher Bell later spun out only to come back and finish second on a slightly different pitch strategy. The Chris Buescher, Kevin Harvick battle, Joey Logano fading over the run. Like, there was so much to watch in that final 150 lap stint, however long the final stage was. I'm gonna give this race an 80% on the groovy gauge. I was satisfied. Dry in the middle of stage 2, but to me, this whole second half of this race was pretty much fantastic. And, let's be honest, the end of the race is the most important part, and this one didn't miss. I'm giving Richmond an 80% for their second race. Share your thoughts down in the comment section below. Do you think I'm way off? Think I'm close to the base on this one? Share your thoughts down in the comment section below. Oh, I'm definitely losing my voice, but thank you all so much for watching. Thanks for sticking with me. I think that's everything I wanted to cover. We will be back here later this week. Plenty to talk about. Lots of fallout from Richmond coming, I'm sure. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We talk NASCAR every single day. And as always, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters. Your support truly goes above and beyond and helps this show grow. I greatly appreciate it. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, everyone. I will see you again very, very soon.